Good afternoon, it's Cassidy from Tactile Technology, and we've got a regularly weekly session in the hot seat where we have someone talk about their life career from growing up and going through the different jobs they've had and where they are currently today. And last week we had a slight challenge technically, so we had to cut it short after about 25 minutes, but we've got Wayne Britton booked in to come back in a couple of weeks' time when he's got a bit of time to join us. And hopefully we won't have the internet issues he had at the time, which caused a lot of stepping and things, and it was quite difficult for people to keep up with. But today we've got someone else. We've got Ben Turnbull from Pentera currently. How are you, Ben?
I'm good, thank you, Lee. How are you? Thanks for having me on.
I can say I'm very well. I love these type of sessions because I get to just ask a few questions and I have to do none of the talking, really. I'll just leave it down to you. We're going to hear about some interesting things based on what we talked about earlier about your career and also your life starting out. So a few things that are going to be quite unusual compared to most people's lives. But like we said earlier, we start off at the beginning. So if you give us a bit of a picture of where you grew up, your parents, and your background at the time, what they did for a living, and then we'll move into your interesting adventure at age 10 as well.
Yeah, we'll lead into that. Yeah, so thanks again, Lee, for inviting me on this. I've been looking forward to this since we discussed it a couple of weeks ago. So yeah, thank you to you and the team at Tactile.
No problem.
As you can probably tell from my accent, I was born in New Zealand, which, the accent never traveled with me. I moved to the UK at a very young age. But, I was 4, I think it was, when we moved to the UK. So back in the, I'll age myself here by saying back in the mid-80s when we moved to the UK. But I spent a good few years in New Zealand. I don't really remember it. I think I probably remember it more via photos and pictures and stories that my mum and dad tell and things like that than I actually do of being there or growing up there. I do.
So how did it start? Are either of your parents from New Zealand, or was it they gone out there?
No, so my dad's a Kiwi and a very proud Kiwi. Doesn't particularly like the fact that I'm a football follower rather than a rugby follower as such. My dad's a very proud All Blacks fan and a very proud Kiwi in general, as a lot of them are. Right, you should be proud of your heritage. But no, it's really odd. I remember 2 things from my childhood of being in New Zealand. One was I had a pet praying mantis.
Not many people have a praying mantis.
Not many people do that, no. But I kept it in a jar that was aired. We had drill holes in the top of the jar and everything. But I took it to school one day when I was quite young, and because it was like a show and tell thing or whatever. And I took this praying mantis in, and my mum had covered it with holes in the top, with cellophane on the top. And within 10 minutes of being in school, the praying mantis had escaped. So I lost that pet quite early on. That was one thing I remember. I also remember, and it might be a timing thing, it might have just been in Rotorua, where I was born in the middle of the North Island, that I don't really remember wearing shoes at school. It was very much a barefoot thing. That might have been because it was hot. It might have been just what I remember from a particular point in the summer. Or I just remember not.
I can guarantee in Maltby in South Yorkshire, where I grew up, we did not go to school being barefoot at all.
No, definitely not. It's probably a bit too cold up there for that. But yeah,
definitely.
I remember the early years, but as I said, I don't remember if it's via photos and stories or if it's actual memories from myself. But I've not lived in New Zealand since. I did luckily get to go back a couple of years ago to see family I haven't seen for a long time. I got to see my dad's mum, who sadly since has passed away, but I got to see her before that happened, and I hadn't seen her. So my nan, or Nana as she was, I hadn't seen since 1989 until I saw her in 2019. So it was 30 years. Saw her on things like this, video calls, and caught up regularly on birthdays and Christmas and, once a month sort of thing. But hadn't physically seen her for 30 years. So that was quite an emotional reunion.
I never got to meet my father's mother because she died before my parents even got married. So,
Wow.
so I only had one, grandmother on my mother's side. So, what was the catalyst for you coming back to the UK from New Zealand? Was that work, one of the parents, or?
Yeah, I think if anyone knows anyone from New Zealand, especially people who travelled the world. So my dad was on his travels when he met my mum in the UK in the late 70s, and travelled all over Europe, all throughout sort of Eastern Europe, through Germany, down through Italy, Spain, France, Portugal, through North Africa. He went out to sort of Israel and places as well. But found his way into the UK because of the work that was available here. He was an electrician by trade, but I think for two reasons: liked working in pubs. One was meeting people, I guess, but two was he's quite fond of Guinness, I think that just sort of led to, and we'll go on to that because he actually became he ran a pub for many years, both locally to where I live now, but also dotted around the south of the UK. He's ran pubs pretty much since. But
so where did you come back to then? What became home when you came back from New Zealand?
So my mum was born in the Midlands, but moved to the south of the UK. We live in a small market town called Alton in Hampshire, and my granddad was a farmer, and that's why they moved down here basically from the Midlands. And so we came back to Alton. We came back to what my mum perceived as her hometown. She left the Midlands when she was very young herself, so she always considered Alton home. This is where they met, or they met in a pub just outside Alton in Selborne, back in the late 70s. So we came back to Alton, and that's where I'm talking to you from now, from my home office in Alton. It's where I still live. It's home to me now. New Zealand will always have a place in my heart. I'm very proud of my heritage, very proud of the country and where I was born, but Alton is, or South UK is definitely home now.
Okay, so what happened then? So you went back to a traditional school and had to wear shoes, I believe.
Yeah. Couldn't get away with no shoes. Even in the south, it's not warm enough to wear no shoes, Lee. Yeah, that's for sure. So yeah, we went to school as normal, sort of having that disrupted. Some in New Zealand, some in the UK. Early stages of school was, I guess, you're just at the start of your life then, aren't you? Start of your education, so you're like a sponge anyway as a kid, if your mind's that way inclined. And I just adapted to the bits that were thrown at me. Basically, I think I went to at least 3 different infant schools, and then settled on a junior school that's literally out of my front door and about 100 yards around the corner, which is where my children go to now. So my 2 older boys go to the junior school that I was at for between the age of 7 and 10, and the 2 younger ones go to the infant school just over the road. So I've got 4 boys. So it's a chaos.
They're following your footsteps.
They are,
with shoes on.
With shoes, following my footsteps with shoes on. But in the same school, yeah. Sadly, not the same teachers. I think all of mine have moved on and retired, and some sadly aren't with us anymore. But the school's still, it's been modernised quite a lot. It brings back a lot of memories. I go to various things that you do when you're a parent of kids of that age, to parents' evenings and performances and things like that. That the kids carry out for you, and it brings back a lot of good memories. Yeah, it feels a lot smaller than it did when I was obviously 8 to 10 years old, but that's purely down to a size sort of thing. I'm sure it's the whole way.
I think all of us were, the environment we lived in when we were children looked massive, didn't it? But it was because we were smaller.
Exactly.
And when you get back to it, it looks quite different.
Yeah, but everything internally still they've they've added to the school. Obviously, the school has extended a couple of extra classrooms here and there and things like that compared to what it was when I was younger. But largely, it's still the same, and it's quite nice to actually go back there whenever possible to go and see their work, or as I said, performances, parents' evenings, things like that, because it does bring back some cool memories. Yeah.
Yeah. So how did things progress? I know there was a change family wise, wasn't there? Before we lead on to, one a bit more adventurous thing you did when you were younger. So how did life change then?
Yeah, so my mum and dad split up when I was quite young. It wasn't too long after we actually came back to the UK. They went their separate ways. I've still got a great relationship with both of them. My dad lives up towards Cambridge now, but we still see him fairly regularly. And my mum's still in Alton. She's the other opposite end of the town to me. But my mum got a new partner, I guess, a couple of years after they split up. That led on to the bit that we're gonna talk about now, basically. Yeah.
If you look at it though, most people nowadays, it's more people than not have relationships break down, and children have to deal with this situation where they're split between two parents and two different lives. And that seems to happen more than not these days, doesn't it?
It does. It does, sadly. Yeah, I guess in a way, it's made me. It's the experience and everything that I went through has made me want to be. And I don't mean this in any way disrespectful to my own father, but because he wasn't really part of our, not a constant part of our life when I was a youngster. Because they split up when I was I guess we came back when I was 4. They split up when I was 5, maybe a little bit older. Because he wasn't a constant, I want to be a constant in my children's life.
Yeah.
And it's important to me that me and my wife Hazel, who I love dearly, stay together as long as we possibly can. And we make that vow of till death do us part and all of that sort of thing. And to provide consistency and everything that I didn't get to have when I was a kid, that broken home sort of thing, as you said, it made me who I am. I don't hold it against my mum or dad or anything like that, but it's something that I strive to provide safety.
I think in these days it is challenging. You've got to have two partners that want to be together, because it doesn't matter if you want to be with your partner if they don't want to be with you, or vice versa. It's not going to work. Exactly. And sometimes it's better not to be together than to be together and making the environment quite toxic and unpleasant for the children and for everyone else. So sometimes it has to happen. But when you've got two partners that are trying hard to work together for it to work, it's much better, isn't it?
It is, agreed. Yes, and I think that's what we do. We bounce off of each other, and we've brought 4 incredible young humans into the world that are both adorable and challenging at the same time in many different ways.
I've been there myself, and it doesn't really get any better when they get older. So most of mine are over 35, right, and one's 40, and they're still challenging. They just bring different challenges, usually more expensive challenges.
Yes, there is that. Yeah, the toy cars and broken bikes turn into actual, real cars and broken bikes and broken bikes.
Holidays and houses and things that need to be done. It's quite interesting as they get older. I'll leave that for you as a surprise.
Sounds great. Yeah, I thought I was going to get rid of all of those issues when they turn 18. No, I love them.
Not.
They're
definitely not. So you've reached 10, and there was a big change there, wasn't there? A real opportunity opened up for you at age 10.
There was, yeah. Something that not a lot of children, I'm sure, get to experience. My mum was in a new relationship, as I mentioned before, and he, that must have been the late 80s, so 1988, maybe 1989, decided to buy the hull and decks of a 38-foot yacht and build a boat himself. He was a plumber by trade, my stepdad, and could turn his hand to most things, or you know, they didn't have YouTube videos back then. A lot of people learn these things from these days, but
you used to buy a book,
yeah,
or go to a library and get a book out.
Yeah, exactly. It was like a Haynes manual for looking at your car and sorting that out.
Yeah,
right?
that's it.
Yeah, he could use a tape measure and he could cut wood, and so he built the entire boat himself internally. Built the galley and the toilet and the bunks and the cabins and everything himself.
Building a boat's one thing, sailing a boat's different. So did he have any experience in that, or did he go and learn that as well?
Yeah, he'd always had an interest in sailing in general, and I think he just he picked up his skipper's license, and he spent a lot of time on yachts when he was younger. But he never owned one, and I think that was his ambition in life, was to own a yacht. And so he built this boat himself, as I said, hull and decks, built the boat, got the best equipment that he could afford in terms of it being an ocean going yacht. So he got, and if you're not au fait with anything to do with yachts, I'm not for 1 minute claiming that I am. I was quite young at the time, but there's a difference between a mast where you can roller the sail into the mast, so the actual sail rollers around in a spiral into the mast, or you can have one that's attached to the boom and rolls up the mast. And it's far easier if it rolls into the mast than it is to roll up. You don't have to have a big cover on and have to fight the weather elements to get a sail out. You literally just put the rope on a winch and winch it out, essentially. So he invested in that. He invested in some ridiculously strong perspex glass for the windows, to the point that the sales guy, he said to him, I need this to be ocean going. And he said, so how strong is this stuff? And he gave him a sledgehammer and said, do what you can. And my stepdad wasn't a particularly tall guy. He was about 5'6", 5'7", I guess, but he was quite stocky. And he went at this piece of perspex with a sledgehammer and didn't get anywhere near cracking it. So he said, yeah, that's sold. I'll take X amount of this size of that to make the windows. And yeah, just built an ocean going boat. And then we done a few trips locally with them, with Mum and Joe, my stepdad, me and my brother.
So a bit of a warming up exercise just to see how it went.
Yeah, for what was coming. Yeah, we went to Cherbourg in France a couple of times. We travelled down the coast of the UK. We obviously went to the Isle of Wight, things like that. Just essentially overnight or day trips, essentially, to get us used to being on the sea. And then in I think it would have been early summer 1990, he said to my mum, I want to take a break from life in general in the UK, and I want to take the boat around the world. I want to go on a trip around the world. And he had a rough agenda of where he wanted to go in his mind, and asked if my mum and me and my brother would come with him. And Mum had a word with my dad, and Dad sort of said, look, I'm from New Zealand, we love traveling. If I could, I'd come with you as well, sort of thing. But I'd be a terrible father to my children if I didn't let them go and experience this. So off we set sail in October 20.
So do you remember how you felt at age 10 with the thought of traveling around the world in a boat?
Daunting. Was the initial bit, Lee. It was the most we'd ever traveled was to Cherbourg in France, which I guess takes 10 hours, 11 hours, something like that on a sailboat, even using the motor as well, sort of thing. It's still, it's half a day journey sort of thing, or half a 24-hour journey, not daylight. And we were being asked to go and experience a lot longer crossings than that. Yeah. My dad made a caveat to us going on the boat. He said, I want to take the boys on an experience before you take them off and do that. So we went to Disney World in Florida with my dad for a couple of weeks in summer 1990. And then we left in October. But my stepdad didn't want our first experience of being on a boat and doing multiple days at sea to be traveling across the Bay of Biscay, which is obviously between northern France and Portugal or northern Spain, because it can be quite rough at times, apparently. and he didn't want our first thing of it being our first experience of multiple days at sea being a bad one, so to say. So he actually took the boat to with some crew. He took one person just wanted to experience it, so he went with him. Basically, he dropped him off in Spain. He got someone else to help him go down the coast of Portugal. He got someone else to help him take the boat to the Canary Islands. There's lots of people in this in that environment, in that space of life, that just crew around, and they get to different places, and then they drop
off. My cousin's husband used to do it. He used to transit boats for people, and he was a miner originally, but he was really into sailing, and he did that, and he used to be the captain of a 200-footer motor yacht for I think it was an oil sheik or someone moved it around the Med for them and ran it for many years before he retired. So he did that for a living.
Yeah, that's exactly what these people did to help Joe take the boat down to the Canary Islands, where we met him in October 20. I keep saying 2020. I don't know why. October 1990. So that was the start of the 3.5 years, basically. Yeah. So for 3.5.
Where did you go then? From the Canaries, where were the major places?
So I won't go into detail because it will do the rest of this call, Lee. But the major sort of detail, the major highlight places were that we started with the longest trip we'd had at this point, which was from Tenerife to Barbados. That was 28 days at sea.
So that's west across. Yeah.
We did some time in Barbados and some of the other Caribbean islands. We did Trinidad and Tobago, Venezuela. We did the Dutch islands in the Caribbean before going through the Panama Canal, which was an experience. I didn't realize that place existed until then. But to go through there with big oil tankers and stuff all around you was pretty crazy as an experience. We then went to Costa Rica, and the plan was to go up the coast. We were on a mission to get to Canada. My stepdad brother lived in Vancouver. So we were going.
So the idea was to go up that coast up to Vancouver.
Go up the coast, but we didn't realize, or maybe Joe hadn't done enough research into the fact that the wind goes directly down that coast. So we'd have been
so it's a challenge to go up.
We'd have been tacking against the wind, and we'd have made very, very little to small progress. It'd have been baby steps essentially to get up the coast of the west coast of the US, and we got told by someone who we met, just another person on a boat in Costa Rica, that to go to Canada, the best bet is to go out to Hawaii and then come back. Because of the winds and everything. So that's what we did. We went to Hawaii, which was 45 days at sea, and then spent, I don't know, about
45 days at sea in a 38-footer, age 10. How did you occupy your mind for that length of time, or were you kept busy all the time?
Kept very busy. We helped out on the boat. We helped out Mum with the cleaning, with the cooking, etc. We do a lot of fishing off of the boat as we were traveling, if the seas allowed it. Obviously, sometimes they didn't. Lego played a massive part of mine and my brother's upbringing, as did reading, as did books in general.
Because education as well, for that 3.5 years, how did you keep up with education?
That was one thing that I think would seriously played on my mum's mind before we went, was the education and the schooling of how am I going to do this without having a detrimental effect on their education and going forward. And my stepdad's brother-in-law was a school teacher, and got us a load of books together to do us through sort of a year or so. And my mum insisted on, I guess, for about the first, I think it was must have been until we got to either Barbados or maybe Trinidad, Tobago or Venezuela. It was somewhere in that sort of region of the trip, that my mum was making us do 3 to 4 hours a day schooling, working through these exercise books, going through it, marking it, working with us. She wasn't a teacher. She wasn't a qualified teacher herself. She's a care worker.
Yeah, but
But,
she thought it was important, so she put the effort in.
yeah, exactly that. But then something must have triggered her. I don't know whether it was what am I making them do this for? I'm making them stay indoors for 3 to 4 hours a day when they could be out playing with other kids and learning different cultures and potentially learning different languages and stuff like that. That she just said, she said to us both one day, "There's no school today. You get to go out." And we went, and I can't remember what it was we'd done, Lee, but we went and done something that day, and I think it just progressed from there. That she said, this trip in itself, as a whole,
Will be an education.
It's you're meeting different cultures, you're seeing different children, how what they've got in comparison to what you had at home.
Yes. So you're effectively living your geography lesson.
Yes, but parts of the geography lesson on a day-to-day basis. Yeah, and but all the while learning stuff around sailing and fishing and different, as I said, different cultures, different kids, different backgrounds, different levels of extreme levels of poverty. And it really made it open,
especially South America. Yeah, I think it's a very different world to what we see, isn't it?
Hugely, yes. I mean, seeing how some of these people lived in some of the Caribbean islands and in Venezuela and South America, as you say, extreme levels of poverty, and it makes you really thankful for the most simple things in life, the day-to-day things that we take for granted.
So we had a little comment from Shaq, who you know very well, a great journey. But if anybody else has got any questions to ask Ben, just especially about his trip or anything else, just drop them in the chat, and we'll ask Ben as we go forward. So we've gone across to Hawaii. We've come back across to Canada. I'm assuming you went to Vancouver to see his brother. So we got to that point. So what happened from Vancouver?
So Vancouver, we met Joe's brother John, and spent it was about 10 months we spent in Vancouver. That's when I fell in love with ice hockey. I think it quite quickly got ingrained into us that football wasn't the sport that they played or followed in, certainly at that point in Canada. Fell in love with ice hockey and managed to go and see the Vancouver Canucks a good couple of handfuls of times. And for my sins, still follow them today. They're not doing so great at the moment, but still keep up to date with ice hockey. Because of that, but also met loads of people that I still talk to now. I was at that stage of my life. I guess I was approaching my teenage years then. There's a couple of guys that I met similar age to me, obviously now, but met back then that I've kept in contact with since, or I found, on social media since and stuff like that. We keep in contact.
It's a beautiful place, though, isn't it? I used to work in Seattle, and I used to be over there quite regular. And if I was there for 2 weeks and I got a weekend between, I would drive up and to Vancouver. It was about an hour and a half, depending on the traffic that day. So it was quite easy from there up through Snoqualmie, across the border, and then I'd turn up to the university onto the seafront and drive down the seafront to the main downtown area. It's beautiful, beautiful place.
It's stunning, and it's one of the greatest cities I think I've ever been to. Great place, lovely people.
It's like you can be driving down there and you've got the sun reflecting off all the glass buildings of the modern part of the downtown, but then you've got seaplanes landing and taking off in the bay. It's just a really different experience, isn't it, Vancouver?
It is. Vancouver's it's a brilliantly strange city, but it's also all of the what you've got within, like you say, touching distance of less than an hour's drive. You've got all of the islands that surround Vancouver Islands and all of the wildlife and the greenery and the escapism that goes with that. Within an hour, you're in such a remote part of Canada that it's you could almost be in a different country, sort of thing. It's crazy, and it's a place that there's 2 or 3 places that I'd love to take my kids back to, and that we went to. There's maybe more than 2 or 3, I guess, but 2 or 3 highlight ones, and Vancouver's definitely one of them.
So 10 months in Vancouver. Where did you travel to next?
So then the initial idea was to travel all the way down the west coast of America. So we did Seattle, we did I can't remember the name of the place. It was at the end of the Juan de Fuca Strait, which is the bed of sea in between Vancouver Island and the US, essentially. But we sort of day hopped all the way down the coast because obviously, as I mentioned before, the wind goes straight down that coast, so you make time a lot quicker than we would have made going up of it. Hence why we went out to Hawaii and came back in. But we did sort of couple of day hops, and we ended up in San Francisco. We saw all of the Delta rivers out the back of San Francisco, Sacramento, etc. There. We did LA, San Diego, all the coast of Mexico, Tijuana, Acapulco, Cabo San Lucas, Zihuatanejo, Ixtapa, numerous places down the coast of Mexico, and then ended up back in Costa Rica at the same place we stopped out on the way out of Panama. We ended up staying in Costa Rica for 3 months. We sort of, as a family unit, we fell in love with Costa Rica. It was another place that I'd love to take the kids back to one day. Just great people, passionate people that live I guess a life on the poverty line, but just they don't complain about it. They're just it's their life. It's what they just get on with. And the plan was to go from there. The plan was to go to the Galapagos Islands, New Zealand, Australia, and then come back up through sort of the Asia and go through the Suez Canal back up through the Mediterranean. But money and funds and everything meant that they had to make a call that we weren't going to do that. And we ended up going back through the Panama Canal to the Dutch islands again, but then going the other way around the Caribbean. So coming up through the Grand Cayman Islands and ended up in doing a small amount of Florida before going to Bermuda and then coming home, basically. So
did you do the same trip across the Canary Islands then back up?
No, we did. So it was to Bermuda and then Bermuda straight to. I think we stopped in Falmouth for one night because it was one of the closest places.
That must be a journey and a half then from Bermuda to Falmouth.
It was. I think that was 29 days at sea from Bermuda back to Falmouth. But it was. I can confirm that whilst we didn't get lost, obviously I'm not still sailing around in the middle of the Atlantic somewhere, but the
triangle
does exist. You
didn't get picked up by aliens and taken to a foreign place.
as far as I'm aware, we didn't. Unless they mind blanked me afterwards. But no, the Bermuda Triangle as a it messes with the compass of a boat does exist. The compass was like it was just spinning round and round. It couldn't cope with it. Luckily, though, we had a satellite navigation system that wasn't affected by it, and my stepdad Joe knew that would be the case. So we followed the line of which we were going until we got out of that, and then the compass then took over and started doing its job again, essentially. So
back to Falmouth, back home. Were there any other adventures on the boat in the future, or was that it, for your life?
I often get asked. I actually spoke to one of my colleagues who Nadav, who works for Pentera, who I work for now. He works into Benelux region, but he's got a boat, and he's a king boat goer, yachty, so to say. And he said he actually asked me when we were at SKO back in January this year, do you ever think you'll do it again? Do you think given that my eldest is 10,
and take your children?
Take my children. I was like, no, I don't think so. I don't think I've got I've not got the experience of sailing in my later life. I wouldn't have the confidence in terms of that.
Yeah, because it is important to be confident, isn't it? Because if you end up in a stressful situation, you don't have the confidence, there's a chance for things to go badly wrong, isn't there?
Exactly that. And I think that's there's that, and there's also I think the world is a very different place today than it was in 1990. Yeah, I think there's more reasons to be concerned in many ways. But yeah, I don't know if it was just a carefree attitude or whatever. But yeah, I think I'd have to think very long and hard. I mean, even back in those days, I mean, I said about the Bermuda Triangle existing. Pirates exist as well. We got approached by pirates on more than one occasion, and they don't like the sight of Joe invested in a Magnum 44, and
So that put them off quite quickly.
Yeah, when they've got machetes or small knives, they get put off by something that could put a hole in their boat and sink them. Yeah, he never had to use it, luckily.
But the threat was there just in case.
Exactly that. So yeah, but pirates do exist, and so does the Bermuda Triangle. If anyone's wondering.
So let's come back to where we went from there. So you're now 14 years of age. How did you find going back into mainstream education after a 3.5-year gap?
Difficult.
Yeah, I was going to say it must have been challenging, because most people had had that 3.5 years of different subjects that have been instilled in them. You'd had that gap. I know it sounded like your mum had tried to do some education, but there would have been a lot missing, wouldn't there, at that point? And you were going in towards GCSEs from 14. You had a year. You've been doing your mocks and then straight into GCSEs. So that must have been a real challenge.
Yeah, it was. I'm not going to pretend it wasn't. It was a challenge for me. I think a little bit more so than my brother, who was a couple of years younger, or is a couple of years younger. And yeah, we both found it quite difficult to come back into school. But it was also getting back into life in general. I think as a teenager, and I've got a brilliant relationship with my brother. We're best mates, and we will be forever. I think the boat accelerated that over and above what some other people do. There isn't a day goes by where I don't have a WhatsApp, a text, a phone call or something from him. Even today, he lives literally a mile or so away from me, and we keep in regular contact.
Which is good.
But which obviously I think helped that we were both doing this together. I think it would have been harder to do something like that on your own, getting back into normal everyday life. But also all my mates that I left behind, there was a lot of school friends that saw me leave as a 10-year-old and come back as a 14-year-old nearly, with blonde hair, because it had been sun bleached essentially when I had hair. Oh, it started going on.
Yeah, that happens to us all at some stage.
It does. Yeah, it starts. I just think my forehead keeps getting bigger. But to come back and I had an accent that was quite strange, I guess, because I'd lived abroad for as long as I had. And it was like a mixture of all these different places, of different cultures and whatever. They said that I sounded largely American, but obviously that's gone now. But it was tough. It was tough coming back into that everyday normality.
So how successful were you with your GCSEs, and how did that affect where you went after that?
I think I passed. I passed enough of them to get into college. I think back then, I think we took 9 GCSEs. I think I failed, but I just don't think I was interested, or maybe I hadn't had that 3 years. Maybe that was a cause of it. I don't know, but I failed on a couple of science degrees, or a couple of science GCSEs. Sorry, but I still got I got a couple of Bs in English. I got Cs in maths. I got a B in art, which is something that I've always enjoyed doing, and I enjoy doing with the kids.
So it was enough to get you a place in a college. So what did you study at college?
I followed what a couple of mates of mine were doing, and my dad at this point had moved into he was a travel agent, or he ran a fairly local travel agency, and I wanted to get a job in sales basically, and I wanted to learn about that. So I ended up doing an advanced GMVQ in leisure and tourism, which was just what my mates were doing really. And it's not actually, apart from giving me, obviously you have to, in college it was a bit different than school. It was a bit more grown up. You had to do you had to set about your work in a different way, and you had to meet objective criterias and essentially KPIs that were put onto you as a student. And I I did all of that. I thoroughly enjoyed my 2 years at college. It's given me even more friends for life that I still speak to, week to week now, and gave me a bit of an idea about the tourism industry that I wanted to sort of follow my dad's footsteps into, because he said there was good money if you could sell stuff in it. So,
how long did you spend in the tourism industry then?
About a year and a half, maybe 2 years, until I realised that whilst it was fun, and there was good money in it, there was good commission in it. It was very up and down. It was very seasonal for obvious reasons.
That's the thing, isn't it? It's very seasonal.
Yeah, and I stumbled across an opportunity with a local software company that was much more local to me. Meant I didn't have to do as much driving, and it was something that I just thought, technology. Yeah, technology is not going to ever go away. It's only going to increase and grow. So I almost, as we spoke about before this, Lee, I almost sort of stumbled into this.
Well, I can say from all the interviews I've done over the last 2-3 years, it's always a fork in the road, and it's usually the fork appears because an opportunity appears, and it's whether I stay what I'm doing or I take this opportunity, or it's a force. You're going along and you've got to go down that route because the business that you're working with goes into liquidation, or you may redundant because they're having to cut back on numbers, and that's what tends to happen. People are forced into change, or they've got something that in front of them looks better than where they are, and they make that decision.
Exactly, and I think that's exactly what it was. I got offered essentially what was a BDR, or what would be described as a BDR and SDR role now. It involved a lot of cold calling, a lot of
a business development rep, for anybody who doesn't know what a BDR is. Effectively doing cold calling and trying to find new business, for the accounts people to take on and work with. So it's that initial engagement for the first time for someone. So what type of software was it for this company?
They sub-distributed for the likes of there was Linux, there was PC Anywhere, if you remember that, by Symantec.
So it was mainly operating systems and those kind of things, so space platforms. So how long did that last for, and how did you find it coming from the leisure industry?
It was I still remember this, and I still quite often quote it, and I think I do it generally to when I'm talking to people either at partners who are in that sort of SDR or sales development role, or even people internally at Pentera, when I said that part of my background has been in it. The cold calling game, it's obviously moved on quite a bit from them. We didn't have this was the 97, 98, must have been 98, maybe 99. We didn't have LinkedIn, you didn't have social media like you've got today, you didn't have the marketing capabilities that you've got around today. So it was literally here's a list of partners, here's a list of people who build PCs, here's a list of whatever it is, just call them, use the phone and call them. And I was happy doing that. I liked talking to people, I liked trying to develop relationships, I liked building that trust up with people, things like that. And it's helped me to a good stage of my career so far. Just being open, being honest with people, and telling them what I can do and telling them what I can't do, basically. So it's served me quite well so far. But it is I remember the statement that was in my offer letter from that company said that you will suffer setbacks. And then I remember it was bolded out, a comma, and then the word regularly was bolded out in the offer letter. And I remember on my first day, the guy said to me, we put that in bold because doing this is a numbers game. It is all about dusting yourself off and going again. If someone's rude or they're abrupt or they say no or whatever it is, you've just got to carry on and keep going. And that regularly being bold for some reason is stuck in my mind for a lot of years
Yeah,
since.
and so a lot of people think that the sales game is just all champagne and lots of money, and there's actually quite a lot of hard work involved, isn't there? In building relationships, making sure that people understand what you actually can deliver, and then moving forward with those relationships and people buying those technologies and supporting it afterwards. Because you might not be doing the technical side of things, but you're still supporting the relationship and making sure everything works afterwards. So it's a lot harder than people think.
It is. I'd fully concur and agree. It is quite often seen that or envisaged by some people that we are we're just out whining and dining and, like you say, drinking champagne all the time. But it couldn't be further from the truth. There is obviously those perks that you are out and about, you're entertaining people at times, but that's just the tip of the iceberg in what we do on a day-to-day basis, for sure.
Yeah, and over time it becomes less appealing, doesn't it?
It does.
Not going there again. No, it changes. So how did this sales role progress then? So you were selling operating system based pieces with this first one. Where did you move on to next?
I found myself moving to one of the partners or one of the relationships that I created. The partner was a company called Wirebird. They were a small MSP in London. I developed a relationship with a couple of their sales guys, and they were looking to add someone into their thing. And the appeal back then, I guess, what was I then, 23, 24, I guess. The appeal of working in London as a youngster back then, and those days where you say, the after work beers and the champagne and the being in London and everything appealed to me at the time. Don't think I could do it now. I don't think I can. I was working in London 4 or 5 days a week then, and 2 hours door to door there and back. That was a big chunk of my life spent on.
Yeah. Well, I used to work for both IBM and Sun, and I used to travel minimum of 2 hours, if not 3 hours, between different places. So I was theoretically based out of Warwick when I was at IBM, but I spent most of my time at Bedfont Lakes or at the South Bank office in central London. And when I was at Sun, again, there was a Coventry office, but I spent most of my time either at London Bridge. There still is there a small office there by London Bridge on King William Street, or at Guillemont Park down by Fleet in Hampshire. And if you've ever done that journey from the Midlands, it's like 3 hours, or 2.5 to 3 hours, even if you're going quickly, which I wouldn't condone anybody speeding, but it's a long way, and it's a challenge. Yeah,
it is. But it was an opportunity to learn a different part of the industry with a couple of guys who I trusted and clearly trusted me. People I still speak to, not as regularly as I'd like to, in the guys that brought me into that company, but it was
so
a great.
I'm conscious of time now because we're coming up to just gone 1:45. We need to try and get to Pentera. So how many other jobs did you have between that and getting to Pentera?
Just one.
What did you do in between then?
I'd learned the partner stuff. I really enjoyed the time with Wirebird, who then got bought by a company called Tomiko. But things changed in my life, and we found out that having had 2 boys, we were expecting twins. So our family was going from 2 children to 4 children.
That's a big jump.
It is. It is a fairly substantial jump.
Went from 1 to 2 to 3. I couldn't imagine going from 2 to 4.
2 to 4 was eye opening. Yeah, but it was it was at a time in my life that I felt that a change was right, but I also wanted something a bit more local again, and so I could help my wife out, basically, so I could be dad and be around to help her. Going from 2 to 4 was always going to be a big jump. So I went to work. I targeted and went to work for Exclusive Networks, who are a cybersecurity distributor, and that leads quite nicely into talking about how the opportunity came up with Pentera, basically. Yeah, I looked after a couple of vendors in my time at Exclusive Networks, as well as being account manager towards the end of my tenure there. But the one sort of main vendor that I looked after for a good period of my time there was a vendor called Imperva, where I met Morgan Jay, who's the VP for EMEA and APAC at Pentera. and Steve Smith, who's the AVP for Pentera for the UK and I and Central Eastern Europe. Morgan was the, I hope I've got this right, Morgan, if you're watching or if you're watching.
You may be apologising if you get it wrong.
Apologise in advance. Morgan was the VP for North Europe, and Steve was one of the he was the top one of the top sales guys in the UK.
This is for Imperva at the time.
For Imperva at this point, yeah. And I got on with them both brilliantly from day one. They made me feel really welcomed and an extension of the Imperva team, alongside Craig Skelton, who was their channel manager, and someone who, hey Craig, who's retired now, but has been amazing to me in the time that I've known him, and he's helped.
You worked for my old boss, Graham Jones.
I did. Well. I did.
I used to work for Graham at a company called Wall Data many years before I go. Beginning of the year, it would have been 1998, 99, I think it was. I worked for Graham. So
GJ, as he was affectionately known at Exclusive, was amazing, and the whole team at Exclusive Networks are incredible, both globally and in the UK. Great company to work for, but enabled me to really do a really good job with Imperva for the 3 or 4 years that I looked after them as a vendor. Gave me some great insight into cybersecurity. It was my first sort of real gig in cybersecurity. I'd played with security vendors a little bit, obviously, in my time in partner world, but they were much more focused on Microsoft being sort of any focus on security and that sort of commodity stuff rather than anything more unique. But yeah, I met Morgan and Steve, and Morgan and Steve reached out to me in November 2021 and just said that they both thought that I should hear what they've got to say, basically, and the rest is history. Now I'm here at Pentera, and we met
Pentera. So tell us about what I know. You knew Steve and that, and they'd reached out to you. But what gave you the drive to go and work at Pentera?
It was a threefold approach, really. It was the trust from these are two of the folds: the trust from Steve and the trust from Morgan to separately, but I'm sure collectively, reach out to me in November 2021 and say what they said to me and entice me in. But then they showed me, amongst other people, in terms of that journey of doing the interview process with Pentera and my own due diligence on the platform and on the software and its place in the market, etc. It is so unique, it's so disruptive, and gives our partners that uniqueness and disruptiveness and differentiation that I thought, and there wasn't really a channel that had been built in the UK. I just thought this is too good an opportunity for me to go and work with two guys who I get on with, first and foremost, really well, who've reached out and got trust in me, but also this technology and the fact that it is so game changing and it is still quite new in terms of adoption by a lot of end users in the market. It was the chance to help them and help the partner base go and make a difference to people in the end users, basically, to take this technology into partners that I know and trust, and partners that I've been introduced to by obviously you Tactile, by
Nuvius, or
yes,
the new business name. Is it Klein? I get confused because they've changed the name so many times. Well, it's not that many times. It's the third time they've changed names.
So yeah,
then Nuvius. Yeah. And then it's moving on again. But how you find that time then since late 2021 through to now? What's been the experience you've gained? It sounded exciting, the technology at the beginning. How have you find it in that journey?
It's evolved and changed just in the time I've been here. It's crazy. When I started at Pentera in January 2022, so I've been here coming up 14 months. We just had one and a bit parts to what Pentera does. We had the core capability, which is everything from the from the inside out, basically from an attacker's or a hacker's perspective. We've recently added ransomware ready to that capability. So the ability to drop a completely safe by design ransomware payload into your environment and stress test your defensive cybersecurity controls and see how they'd cope with a real life ransomware attack, but safely. And we've developed sort of quite a bit since then. We've now got the surface capability, so everything from the outside in. So that complete 360-degree attacker's perspective, essentially, of your business. And then most recently, credentials exposure, which allows you to search into all areas of the web to see what exposed credentials you've got. But more importantly, over and above that, as a threat intel exercise, we can use them against you using automation, again, completely safely. So there's been loads of different parts that have been added. There's been that, plus our SVA, the Security Validation Authority, access essentially to some of the biggest brains, cyber brains in this industry, in our R&D team to help you on your journey with continuous security validation. And yeah, what I've enjoyed most and what I've got most from it is, again, something that I've loved doing from the start of my career I'm going to say in sales in general, which is just getting to meet people, getting to build relationships with people and build trust and work on a partnership together. But also take something that is not boring and mundane in this industry, that hasn't really got a competitor as such, that's got that really unique message to the market, that's got something that should give you any partner, including you guys, Lee, that real puff your chest out moment that you've got a technology in your kit bag that can actually make a difference to people, but also that differentiates you as a partner as well, which is great. And I've really enjoyed it so far. I've loved.
So we've only got 5 minutes. Well, we've got 4 minutes left, so we need to finish on the hour. So just what, because we've been talking for an hour, it doesn't seem like it. If anybody's interested, I did an overview yesterday, so you can find that under events if you want to find that. So I show you. We've got this thing about eating your own dog food, but I was told a much better way of saying it is sip your own champagne. But I'll still feel more comfortable with eat your own dog food. But we did that yesterday, and then next Monday at 2:00, I'm going to do show you how a black box attack looks like within Pentera, but also then pivoting that into a grey box, which is effectively applying some credentials, like you'd had your credentials stolen through some kind of phishing attack and things, and see what the difference is in the results. We are doing it in a lab environment, so we have got some vulnerabilities, by design. Otherwise, you'd not see anything. So, but it gives you a really good picture of how it works. And we're also going to follow up on some pieces around credentials. We're going to do some AD credential security checks as well, to give people a picture of how that looks like as well. We've got Tom from Pentera going to join us to do that in the future as well. So come along and join us. We're going to do that at 2:00 every Tuesday. And Ben, if you're free any Monday at 2:00 in the future, come and join us, and then you can tell us a little bit where we are. Quick thing to show people some details. So if you want to look at Pentera yourself directly, there's Pentera's website. So jump on there, pentera.io. We've also got LinkedIn for Ben, if you want to go and connect with Ben and learn more about his experiences in life, plus also talk about where he is at Pentera. And then finally, email for Ben as well. If you want to grab Ben's email and drop him a line, there's Ben's details. So a couple of things we need to finish off with that very, very quickly. One, training shoes. Yeah, because it's usually guitars on the wall, not training shoes. I hear you've got an extensive collection.
I do, currently at somewhere between 85 and 90 pairs, I think.
When does it turn from a collection to an addiction?
My wife thinks it's already an addiction. I think it's still an obsession. I think I need to break through 100 for it to be an addiction. But it's I say I've got a different pair for every day of the quarter. So
there you go.
excuse. That's a
So one thing I primed you with before, I always have two questions at the end of every session, which is, what's the best meal you've ever had? What was it? Where was it? Why was it the best meal? So if you can give us an answer to that one.
It's actually quite a recent one that my wife and I went to Kerridge's in London recently, which was partly funded by a gift from all of my old colleagues at Exclusive Networks as a leaving gift from them. Luckily, because it wasn't a cheap lunch, but it was just I think it's for a twofold reason, really. A, because of that, thank you to my ex-colleagues at Exclusive, appreciate it. But also having 4 children, my wife and I don't get to spend a huge amount of time, just her and I at times.
So it's like your date night.
It was, and it was lovely. It was nice to have a day out together and to have a couple of glasses of wine and a nice meal. And I'd advise anyone that it's not cheap, but it's 100% worth it because the food was.
It's all about experience, though, isn't it?
It is
the service and everything. So it's not somewhere you go, weekly. It's somewhere you go once or twice in a lifetime.
Exactly, and it was fabulous. The food I can say and was top draw for sure.
And then the second question is, what's on the back of spending 3.5 years sailing around the world at age 10, this might seem a bit calm, but what's the most adventurous thing that you've done in your life?
I think it's an experience that was part of that. It's something that's stuck in my memory for years, and I get asked about it pretty much every day by the children because I think it blows their mind a little bit that I did it. That I was stood at the age of where did I have my 13th birthday in Mexico? So I would have been around 12, I guess, 12 and a half. I stood about 10, maybe 15 meters away from flowing lava. And that is an experience that I'll never forget. A piece of flowing lava going across a road and into the sea. I'll never forget the noise. I'll never forget the smell. And it still fascinates. As I said, I get asked about it every single day from one of the children because they're obsessed with volcanoes, as I was when I was.
Kids love things like that, don't they? Something as violent as a volcano.
I don't think as many people can claim they've seen flowing lava and can feel the heat from it and the smell and everything. So that's a pretty cool thing. Well,
thank you very much. It's been a pleasure having you today, and what a great story, and that journey through life. It was amazing to get to hear that. We are slightly over time, so I do apologise to everybody. We run over a little bit, but we had so much to fit in. It was amazing. But thank you very much. And if you could stay on afterwards, and I'll just take us out the feed when I shut it down, and we'll just have a quick catch up after it, if that's okay with you.
Cool. Thank you, Lee. Thanks
ever so much. And again, always jump back every Tuesday. We've normally got somebody in place. And like I say, next Monday, we're going to talk about Pentera and do a black box live penetration test using Pentera. So join us for that. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Lee.